Christmas lights. We love to look around and see them. We go driving in different neighborhoods. It's a wonderful thing to do this time of year. It's one of those Christmas traditions that has been around actually for not very long, but I would say is probably the most significant one we have. It all started really back in the 1500s when Martin Luther looked around the landscape around his house and loved the way the moonlight went through the trees and wanted to recreate that in his home. And so he put candles on his tree. The only problem with that is that candles on real trees can catch fire. And they did. In many cases, a year, trees caught fire, houses caught fire, even people died because of it. But it wasn't until 1879 when Thomas Edison created the light bulb that that began to change. Just a few years later, somebody who worked for Edison, a man named Edward Johnson, in 1882, took the things from Edison's factory and he made a strand of lights that had 80 lights on it. He multicolored all around his tree. They even flashed on and off, and it mesmerized everybody. I mean, people came from far and wide around the United States just to see this tree. Only problem is it cost $100 just in the material to make that strand of lights. Most workers at that point in United States history didn't even make $100 a year. It was out of the range for everybody. So it wasn't until 1924 that there was finally a string of lights that was affordable to the common person. And then trees began to be lit, houses began to be lit, stores had already begun to be lit a little bit. And Christmas lights took off.
But I would argue this is the most significant Christmas symbol we have.
Because it's the most biblical Christmas symbol we have. Remember back to the first midweek short on Christmas traditions. I talked about 3 different tiers of traditions. There's the ones that honor God, and we need to keep those. There are the ones who are neutral. We need to make sure those honor God. The ones that don't honor God, and we need to replace those. I would say lights are in that top tier. They honor God. I think they're actually probably one of the only or few biblical symbols we have for this time of the year. I guess the manger scene would be the other one that goes in line with this. But we see this theme of darkness to light. It goes back all the way to Isaiah as he prophesies the coming of the Messiah. We find it in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. And then we fast forward in Isaiah to when he's talking about the suffering servant, the Messiah, Jesus coming. And as he does, he uses this light imagery again. Chapter 42, verse 16, just after talking about the suffering servant, he says, "And I will lead the blind in a way that they do not know, and paths they have not known. I will guide them. I will turn the darkness before them into light, the rough places into level ground. These are the things I do. I do not forsake them." And then we fast forward to Matthew, and we see that Jesus, when he begins his ministry, he quotes from that Isaiah passage. It says, "Now when he heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew into Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali. So as spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the great way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. For those dwelling in the region of the shadow of death, on them a light has dawned." And then Luke, as he talks about Jesus' birth, we get a number of songs. One of those songs is from Zechariah. Zechariah has just had a son, John, who will be John the Baptist. But his song is mainly about the one coming after John, the one John is pointing to. And he again uses this light metaphor. At the very end of his song, it says that he will give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Again, we have that image of darkness to light. And John, oh man, John loves this image. So in John chapter 1, as he begins his gospel, as he talks about Jesus coming to the world, he begins this way. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life. The life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And then in John chapter 3, just after the famous verse, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Just after that verse, a couple verses down in 19, it says, and this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than light, because their works were evil. So here he contrasts Jesus coming, the light coming in the world, and then the world which is darkness. But that's the good news, isn't it? The light has come in to darkness. John chapter 8, we again see this imagery. Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So here we begin to see what Jesus is going to do for us. As he comes into this world, he wants us to have the same light in our lives. He wants to transform us as well. And then we move over to John chapter 12. We see in verse 35, it says, so Jesus said to them, the light is among you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of the light. Now, this is right before Jesus will go and be crucified. And he's calling his disciples to follow him, the light of the world. So again, that they may be transformed into those who reflect that same light. Once again, we find in John chapter 12, verse 46, it says, I have come into the world as the light, so whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. And that's the good news, isn't it? The light has come into the world.
So we don't have to dwell in darkness anymore. In our sinful world, Jesus has come to change it, so we can see clearly in this world.
See how he wants us to see, to live how he wants us to live. So when Jesus ultimately came and died on the cross and rose again, it brought salvation to our lives, but it also brought light to our lives. And it meant that we should be a light into this world. As you say on the Sermon on the Mount, you are the light of the world. A city on the hill should not be hidden. And so when we see the lights, they're gorgeous, aren't they? We want to see them. We want to go and look at them. The gospel is the same thing. We have a message to the world that is as attractive as going by and seeing Christmas lights. So this Christmas season, may we be people who show this light in the way we live and in the words we speak.